That's the same pit 30, 35, 40 minutes later. What did the fire department, what did the first responders have, or the operators have to do, to physically do to achieve this?
Do not throw water on it.
Oh, don't throw water on it, yes. And we talk about some experiences with that. But nothing. If the facility were designed, or the containment pit exists, or that it's entrapped in one location, nature is going to take its course. This, to a first responder, is a much more manageable situation than the previous photo, obviously. Then we talk a little bit about unconfined spills on water. And I had a student last week. I ran a workshop, 3-day workshop last week, and the student said, well, at our facility, we have a big central containment pit, and then it has a ditch which runs, a trench runs from it to the ocean. I said, what's better, to leave the LNG in the pit or drain it to the ocean? I don't know his facility. I don't know the layout. I don't know where the discharge into the ocean is. I don't know prevailing winds. I don't know how close his containment pit is to surrounding infrastructure. There's a lot of questions to be answered there. But my comment is, well, if you leave it in the pit and you can keep the ignition sources away, you should see vaporization noticeably start to drop off. The cloud will shrink. I said, you run it down that ditch, one, it's going to go from a steady state vaporization rate to initial vaporization rate land as it goes down that what I call a hot ditch. It's warm earth. And when it hits the Caribbean or whatever it hits, you're going to see a really impressive vapor cloud until you run out of LNG. And now, if you can live with that impressive vapor cloud and it's going downwind and there's nothing downwind that bothers you, maybe that's an option. I don't know the man's facility. But he needs to understand the laws of physics and what he can expect when he makes that decision or starts to run that LNG down that ditch. Now this is, again, they won't let me do this these days. This is an old photo. There's too much built around that pond, but they're just pouring LNG under one of our, actually the firewater pond. I hope the pumps are turned off. But this is another one of those light days. It's wintertime. There's not much, no leaves in the trees. Very light wind, nothing cigar-shaped, long and thin cigar-shaped about this cloud. It's just drifting wherever it wants to go, and it's just drifting off into the tree line. What's that there to a first responder? Potential ignition source. Now it's no longer in the cloud, the wind's drifting this way, this is light and variable, so what invariably Murphy's Law says is going to happen. That's the problem encountered with an LNG spill to a first responder, dealing with this kind of potential incident. Luckily the truck wasn't running, there's nobody in it. They didn't have an incident that day, but it becomes, I mean, easier said than done to manage a problem like this. And it may be that all he's going to be able to do is evacuate the area, keep the people out of it, and let it dissipate. Unless he's got probably some fixed systems he can use to mitigate that, and we'll talk about those. But what I pound in their heads over a 12-hour workshop or a 3-day workshop is the value of that confinement. That's steady state vaporization rate. This is an easy problem to control as far as keeping ignition sources out. We talked about the long, thin cigar shape. Like I said, some days it's this one big blob which just rolls from one side of the containment pit to the other side and will chase you around all afternoon. I'd almost say if I had my preferences, if I'm going to have a spill, I'd almost want steady 25-knot winds in lieu of light and variable. I'd pick the steady 25-knot winds just because I'm probably going to have an easier time managing the situation. This statement comes out of a published article, several years old, but we talked about it this morning. Dangerous cloud is always within the visible cloud. There's a tendency for human beings to focus on what they see and ignore what they don't see. This is also true in an emergency, confined space entry, and I don't see a danger, I'm going to go rescue my buddy. And they focus on that visible cloud and don't think about what else, where else those vapors might be. I learned this lesson. I mean, I'm not perfect. Bob, for 20 years, goes out. He's not a crazy man. He goes out from a 90-degree angle with a torch, a flare, and a 10-foot pole. When he's happy with the wind direction and he looks like his escape route's open, he just goes and taps this into the cloud right there. And even Bob's kind of short, but he can move fast the other direction. Because in close proximity to that vapor cloud, it's putting out some heat when it ignites. Okay? He's been doing it for 20 years. Every time he lights this darn thing, ignition. Now, if it's a real rich cloud, you might get a little fireball effect, kind of spectacular. If it's real lean, it just kind of lazily lights, and just flame front back to the pit. You have a pool fire. Every time, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times a year we do this. That particular day, the wind was kind of variable. There was a fence on the other side of the cloud that was brand new, had little aluminum slats, and Don't burn the fence was kind of one of the rules. It rolled over the fence, so Bob backed off. It rolled away from the fence, Bob starts making his move. It starts rolling towards Bob, Bob backed off. Cloud's been there a while now. We've been pouring water in this pit for some time. This cloud's old. We know what the temperature of the vapors are here, right there, just above minus 260 or something, very cold vapors. What's going on with this cloud all the way downwind? What's it doing? It's warming. At some point, it's going to warm to a point, two things are going to happen. At some point, it's going to become neutrally buoyant and start to go vertical on me unless the wind's keeping it down. And at some point, it's going to get so warm, it's not going to do what anymore? It's going to get so warm, it's not going to condense moisture out of the atmosphere, and I'm not going to be able to see it. This cloud had been out there a while. Okay, so he's wait, no, wait. Okay, he goes again. He finally gets in there and taps it. Then he's gone. Nice big ignition. Flame front starts moving back towards the pit, and I'm watching this thing. And by the way, this cloud, about right here, 100 feet away, no, 50 feet away, was the property line, the woods, tree line. We never let the cloud get in the tree line. We had 50, 75 feet, 50 feet, let's say. It looks good. We light it. The flame started going back to the pit. At the same time, the flame went the other direction. It just went two directions. I'm watching it. And all the students are watching it. They got the cameras. We let you take pictures. They're taking cameras, there's photo, and all this kind of stuff. The first indication that you're having a bad day, this flaming squirrel's falling out of this oak tree. And you ever seen Apocalypse Now, the trailers at the end of the napalm strike on the tree line? Just like that. The tops of 4 oak trees just went, whoom. And that little career dissipation light starts going beep, 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 because it dawns on me, I've just set the woods on fire. And the bosses don't frown, they frown on that kind of thing at the fire school, because it's not our property. And actually, that class, I have to give them credit. They hung in there. They got a free lesson in wildland firefighting. Because I said, guys, we got to drag some hose because you've got to save my job. And they put those 4 trees out. Now, 2 of them later died and fell down. One kind of came back, never looked really healthy. And after that, I convinced my bosses to get a bulldozer and push that tree line back about 100 feet. We got the property, it was A&M property. We got the permission, somebody, and we pushed that tree line back, build the buffer zone. But the thing is, we got kind of a little complacent, about that vapor cloud. It's not, you've got a good indication, and I pound this in those first responders, but it's not a complete picture. In fact, the further downstream, the downwind you get, the more incomplete the picture becomes, the warmer the vapors are getting. So even I've been caught by that before. May travel considerable distances before concentrations fall below LFL. I want to talk a little bit about this. You can plan, you can build containment pits, you can put in water curtains, you can put in high expansion foam, you can plant dry chemical capabilities on facility, and you can pre-plan for it, and you can decide how I'm going to respond. There's at some point, though, when it comes to the weather, you're just dealt the cards that you're dealt. And I've been doing this for years. I've done it in light rain, moderate rain. I've had lightning shut me down. I've had high winds, north winds, south winds, no wind, moderate wind, variable winds. Last Tuesday, the gods looked down on me from on high and just for whatever reason said, let's mess with him. I put 2,500 to 3,000 gallons of LNG in our small pit that morning. Everything's looking good. Overcast, little mist, not too bad. Students are fixing to come down. We're going to spend all morning doing all kinds of things with LNG, burn up the whole lot of it. A squall line comes through. Not just any squall line. This was an impressive squall line. All of a sudden, the wind died, shifted 180, kicked up to about 30 knots, and we had a torrential downpour. Now, most containment pits, if you have a containment pit in let's say a bermed area around your tanks, all the ground around the bermed area slopes to where? Containment pit. Well, when we built these pits, the environmental people at the field said, well, where's all that foam going to go? We don't want the foam on the ground. I want slope slab to the pit, which is not what I wanted. I would like out here, I think it slopes away from the pits, doesn't it? I think, yeah. But the environmental guys won, and so it slopes gradually to the pit to contain the foam. The foam doesn't go on the ground. Well, when the torrential downpour hit, that means that entire slab is depositing all that rainwater where? In the pit. The wind's blowing 30 knots. Trash cans are going by me. Boxes full of this are going by me. Paper cup dispensers are blowing by me. I mean, it is blowing. the rain is coming down, and it was an impressive vapor cloud. And at this point, the lightning started, the field shut in, everybody's supposed to be under shelter, and somebody's screaming at me on the radio because you guys aren't under shelter. Well, I have this vapor cloud thing going on, and we have water curtains, we have monitors, we have high expansion foam. The high expansion foam is great stuff. It can do wonders for you in a couple of instances with an LNG incident, but it doesn't do well in 30-knot winds. Forget the foam generator is out there, but it's not going to work. It won't stay on the pit. The water curtains are all on. We kick the water curtains on, some more water curtains on. We kick the monitors on, and we're doing a pretty good job. Now, unfortunately, though, 30-knot winds is doing what to the water curtains? We're rolling them over. The water monitors are going out there, and they're kind of at some point going 90 degrees with the wind. But between the water curtains and the water monitors, what am I trying to do? Warm vapors. And I've got them, obviously I've placed them where they're not rolling back into the pit, though I don't think it would have made much difference if there was so much water going in the pit. There's nothing I can do to stop that vaporization. I just can't do it, not with the rain going in the pit. And so, yes, sir?
Did you have RPTs?
No, unfortunately. Well, I guess in that case, unfortunately. Yeah. It's a training thing. I like RPTs, managed RPTs. But our gas comes out of Willis, Texas. It's 99% methane. Though even some literature says with enough agitation you can make an RPT. Since the day we contracted with them several years ago, I haven't been able to make an RPT to save my life. Now, if the old gas is coming from wherever overseas, I could almost spit in it and make an RPT. I mean, I could do it at will with a fire hose. I can't with the stuff out of Willis. It's 99% methane. Literature says I'm supposed to be able to. Maybe I'm not agitating enough, but I can't make it happen. And so I didn't have that problem. But what can I do? I got on the radio, called my supervisors, called the guys across the creek. I said, I need to extend the hazard zone, close the roads. It's going south across the pond. Keep everybody out. They did so, closed the roads, kept all the looky lures out, and we just let it go. I did what I could to warm it up with the water curtains and the monitors. The rain probably was doing a bit of that for me, and the wind was doing one good thing for me at 30 knots. Mixing, diluting. And so even though at that kind of humidity, I was getting visible vapor clouds probably well below LEL. And we've got a gas meter out there. Yeah, I got 5, 10, 15 invisible because of that much moisture in the atmosphere, but nothing really to worry about. And in a matter of about 15 minutes or less, actually, at some point, the rain subsided, the winds kind of died a little bit, and I looked, and the vapors are gone. I have a pit with 2,500 gallons of rainwater and no LNG. Took about 15 minutes at the max. Gone. Pit never overflowed. I vaporized it so fast, the pit never overflowed. It just replaced the LNG with the rainwater. Yes?
Let me ask you a stupid question.
Okay.
Why did you ignite the cloud?
Why didn't I?
Yeah.
Because I thought about it, but by the time the rains hit, the wind kicked up, and the cloud was in the trees, across the creek, before I could say, what the heck? And I'm going, okay, if I light it, I don't know, and I'll talk about this cloud behavior and flame behavior and these kind of winds. I don't know if it's going to burn back to the pool or it's going to hang in the trees. And I've seen these flame fronts hang off, and I'll show you some photos of it. Probably I could have gotten away with it, but by the time it was already, they were seeing visible clouds across the pond and over into what we call disaster city. Forget it, let it go. I figured I got enough dilution, just let it go. But I considered it. If I'd known what was going to happen, I'd just lit it beforehand. But had I lit it, I'll show you some photos. But had I lit it, I don't know. It's lit. It's burning in a pool. It's not going anywhere unless I'm pushing enough vapor out. And I have seen that whole flame front just move, leave the pit, and just go wherever the wind takes it. And at that point, I've lost control of it. I'm not controlling where the fire is anymore. And I'll show you a little bit of this, I guess. Oh, there it is. Dangerous distance decreases when wind speed increases. I pound that in their heads also. Like I said, I'd almost rather have 25-knot winds than no wind at all if I had a major release. High winds dilute gas. Tuesday testified to that, and I like dike walls. Now, I've heard varying comments or opinions about this in some of the literature. Most of my pits at the field are about 4 feet deep or 2 to 4 feet deep over the years. Cloud comes out, rolls across the ground at some good distance, and at some point starts to break up and go vertical. We have an 8-foot deep pit, with actually 8-foot walls on it. I was quite shocked. First day we ever loaded it, 45 square meter pit. We're pouring LNG in. Cloud builds up, rolls out the top. I expected it to go right across the ground and on down. It rolls out the top of that 8-foot pit, kind of came across the wall, kind of came down, and then just did a nice lazy 180 and went vertical. Never really had any downwind plume, and that's been the same every time I've loaded that pit in the last 2 years or so. Is it a fluke? I don't know. I mean, there's literature talking about that, saying no, they didn't get that effect. I can't give you hard data on it. I suspect that it's taken long enough to get the vapors out the top of the pit. They're starting to already warm before they breach the top. So they're halfway to becoming buoyant. So very deep containment pits with a small spill in the bottom might be a very good thing. It's going to limit that downwind plume, and that's what bothers me as a first responder, the stuff drifting downwind. And we talked about this. When I preach this to these first responders, so the next thing I say is, okay, if you're worried about this downwind plume, what can you do to shrink it, eliminate it, or shorten it? And they naturally will say, well, warm the vapors. And how can they warm the vapors? Typically 2 ways with the tools they have at hand. What will warm the vapors? Fine water mist. If I force contact of the vapor with a fine water curtain or a water pattern or a monitor spray pattern,